What's up, Salt Strong family? This is Pat Ogletree, and in this video, I want to talk about the best ways to cast to tailing redfish. We get a lot of questions on where should you place your cast. Should you put it right on top of the fish? How far in front of the fish? A lot of that depends on a few factors. One of the factors is the mood of the fish. If the fish are super spooky, then you'll definitely want to cast further away and lead the fish into the lure. Now, what I mean by lead the fish into the lure is you want to cast it in the direction that the fish are going and just stop it and let the fish come and find the lure. Now, sometimes what will happen is they get really hyper focused in one particular area and they're not really moving. They're just kind of milling around in that, rooting around in that mud down in the bottom, and they're looking for one specific thing. That's an instance where you'll want to put the lure right on top of them. Now I'm going to show a couple different casts that's going to help in each one of these scenarios. The first cast that I want to show you is one way to lead the fish. There's a couple different ways to do that. The first way is this. We're going to pretend that stick sticking out of the water is a redfish, and they're moving right to left. So what I'm going to do is first, obviously, is figure out what direction they're moving so I know where to place the cast. Sometimes it's not as obvious. You'll just see the tip of a tail sticking out and you'll have to watch them for a while. Just be observant and pay attention. Once you figured out what position they're facing in, then you determine how fast they're moving. If they're moving at a rapid pace, then you're going to want to go ahead and put your cast further ahead. If they're kind of slowing down and not moving very fast, you can put it closer. But again, you got to be careful. If you're dealing with spooky redfish, that could cause a problem and you could spook them. The first cast that I like to do is when you're dealing with redfish that aren't particularly spooky, but they're moving at a pretty good pace. They're not sitting still. So I'll show you that one. What I like to do is you can cast past the fish. When lure hits the water, reel it in fast, just under the surface of the water, and then when it gets to the path that the fish is traveling on, just kill it. You don't want to do anything else to it. Just let it sit. You want to let the redfish find the lure. It's much better that way. If you're trying to twitch it and pause it and get their attention, then sometimes they can feel the vibrations of that line, and that can cause them to spook off. So it's best to let them find the lure by putting it in their path of travel. Now, another way that you can do it is you can place the cast right in front of the fish. If you're pretty good at your casting accuracy, just put it right at the distance of where the fish is traveling. And then again, just let it sit and let them find the lure. Another scenario that you're going to find redfish tailing is when they're not really moving around at all. They're concentrated in one area and they're just rooting around in the mud looking for something specific. They can get hyper-focused into that. And in that scenario, you're going to have to place the cast really close to them, almost on top of them. But same rules apply. You still have to find what direction the fish are facing. You don't want to cast at their tails. That's not going to do you any good. So after you figured out what direction that they're facing, you want to use a light presentation when you're casting. That's when I like using smaller lures like that Slam Shady 2.0 with the tail pinched off. It's essentially just a small jerk bait. And when you cast that lure, you can make it land with hardly any splash at all. And in this situation also, what I like to do is I like to use a sidearm cast. Whenever you use a sidearm cast, the lure projects really low across the surface of the water, and you can just feather the spool and take your rod tip and you guide it in, and it just lets a little bit of splash out, and that's it. If you try to cast in this scenario overhand and you do that high arcing cast, even though you might put it in the exact spot, it's going to land really hard and you could cause the fish to spook off, and you really don't want that to happen. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Now, had I had thrown an overhand cast, this is the difference between the splash, even with a small lure. You can see how that could definitely spook a redfish off. So another tip that I would like to share with you is, we all do this. We all have bad casts. So instead of letting that cast land and potentially scaring the fish, like you see your lure and it's going to land right on top of the fish, or it's going to land past the fish and the line is going to hit the fish, what's called lining a fish. As soon as that fish feels that, it's gone. You're not going to have a chance at that at all. But if you pull the lure back before it hits the water, you'll get another shot at it. You'll get another shot at having that fish. Now, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to cast back out to that, but before it lands, I'm going to pull it back in. So we're going to do that. And I knew that wasn't going to be a good cast. I knew what was going to happen was that line was going to go over that fish and it was going to spook it off. But at least now I've probably got a good shot at casting to that fish again. And again, when I go to pull it back, I'm not going to pull it back like I'm trying to yank a lure out of the mangroves. It's just a slight little pullback, and you want to make sure that that lure comes back and not lands on the fish. I'll do it again. So typically when you're fishing for tailing redfish, it's going to be in conditions a lot like this, where it's just glass calm. In these conditions, you want to make sure and use a lure that's not going to use a lot of commotion when you're casting with it. And one of my favorites is the Alabama Leprechaun. This one is great in the fact that you can really cast this a far distance, and it's pretty aerodynamic, so it doesn't catch the wind, and you can make some really accurate long distance casts. If you have to lead the fish by a couple of 8-10 feet, and you've got to do that from a long distance away, this is the one to go with. Now, in a situation where you're having to catch those fish that are rooting around in the mud and you got to put that cast right on top of them, that's when I like to use something smaller like the Slam Shady 2.0 with the tail pinched off. That one you can just cast out there right on top of the fish, feather the line when it's coming off the reel right at the end of the cast, and then take your rod tip and just ease that bait right into the water, and you can make an almost splashless presentation, and that's hard to beat on those type of fish. Now, if you've ever wanted to try any of these lures, right now we have an outstanding offer. We have what we call an 11 for 1 offer. You get 11 of these lures for just 1 cent plus shipping. For more information, go to saltstrong.com. And if you're new to Salt Strong, just know we're the best online fishing club in America, especially if you're interested in catching redfish, sea trout, snook, and flounder. There's nothing else like it. We actually guarantee that you catch more fish while saving time and money. We do this through premium education, our exclusive insider fishing community, and huge discounts on the best tackle for saltwater anglers. To learn more, go to saltstrong.com. Otherwise, we hope to see you again soon.